Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel simply is discerning what is true. Today is the 17th day of November 2024. I should say 18th day. It goes by quickly as it gets by the end of the year. So it's November 18th, 2024. I'm reading from the book by the Apocolypse, Unsealed by James M. Pryse. This chapter is chapter 3 I'm reading. It's called The Riddles of Revelation. When I was talking with Phil Langdon, we talk every now and then. We've done videos, many videos together. He explained that Scripture itself is like riddles in many ways. And most people are not reading the Scriptures. Either they're reading it literally or they're reading it historically. And they'll never find the truth there, folks. They never will. So those in the church who think they have the truth don't have it. Some of their symbols do reveal some things. I tried to share, I think it was the other day, probably 3 or 4 days ago, the structure of the temple or church buildings are actually revealing some things. But if you don't know what to look for, you're not going to find it. That's the problem. So, and this is done on purpose. It's to keep the profane from finding the truth. That's why we used to have mystery schools. And so I'm setting this up, and I may have said this before. If I have, please forgive me. But I studied early church history back in 2000, 2001, roughly, at a church history professors at Erskine Theological Seminary, which is located in South Carolina. It's an ARP denominational seminary. It is the only one for that particular denomination. I actually went to another particular seminary for 1 semester and was somewhat unsatisfied with the seminary, and someone suggested that you do have a seminary that actually teaches church history in your state, and I didn't realize that. The seminary I went to was in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is right above it's in North Carolina instead of South Carolina. It's about, probably 10 miles, 15 miles, maybe not even that far, off the South Carolina border. And so I looked into it, and the person was right. And so they had actually 3 or 4 different particular church history professors. One of them I quite liked a lot. I never studied any early patristic church history classes. So let me explain something why church history is important. I'm not saying church history is correct. I'm just simply saying this is where you discover where the theology and the doctrines of the church are put together. And you begin to see why or who and where this took place. You have particular important men at that point who put it together. But there was an intense battle before even this, between what we would call the pagan perspective and eventually later on would be the Catholic Church perspective. And what happened was the pagan perspective lost. The pagan perspective had far more information there. This was a fight. When I mean fight, this was a debate going on with 2 camps. And eventually Eusebius would win this fight against others. And as this fight continued on, and gradually that was pretty much sealed when Constantine came to power, when he had his first church council at Nicaea. And this completely established the Catholic Church. no one really knows a lot of this, and they have never put it together, I guess, in some ways, because most people, not most, all pastors take very little church history. They're taught what I would call how to preach, how to read Greek and Hebrew literally, and they're dumbfounded. And I'm not putting these people down, but I'm being straightforward. Those within the church are completely lost because they're not seeing what we call the mystery schools, which were there in 300 years before Constantine put together. And Constantine was only interested in a couple things. One was major, was to basically consolidate the kingdom of the Roman Empire and make it one. You see. Let's get the umbrella of the Christians, so to speak. Let's get the umbrella of the Roman citizens, so to speak. And let's get also the Eastern perspective also. In other words, to bring them together. And with that, that would be the way he would kind of, what we call, glue together the groups, what we call somewhat. And it was a way of satisfying not only the Romans, that is, in Western Europe, also the Jews, or supposedly some Christians that were involved in Palestine, and then eventually the Eastern group, which was further to the east, which would be in Turkey, modern day Turkey. One other thing simply is that most people are unaware of. They think simply when they say Rome is the capital. Yeah, Rome is the capital, but reality simply is almost all the Christian supposedly strongholds were actually in North Africa, and the Middle East was somewhat there. So the bulk of those who, quote unquote, were involved in the church, this is why Augustine is centered in Northern Africa. And he's considered the father of the church, the Catholic Church. With that, we fast forward another 100 years, so to speak, to the time of Augustine. And Augustine is dealing with what I call quite a few different issues. But you can already see the church is moving away from a pagan perspective, a mysterious perspective, an esoteric perspective, and moving to a literal and a historical perspective. It was already being sealed and shut. Now, is there things wrong with Scripture? No. It's the way it is taught that's caused problems. Okay? So I want to lay that out as groundwork here to explain to you why. So what I'm going to be reading tonight is going to be the Apocolypse, Unsealed by James M. Pryse, the Riddles of Revelation. This is chapter 3. But again, I want to explain to you simply the groundwork is critical for you to understand what is going on. This is somewhat of a revolution in some ways. Those who were in the pagan perspective actually thought in some ways that early on that they were going to be successful. But there was a pushback. And eventually that's the ones who sealed the deal. So we're going to begin to read here, chapter 3. Again, the Riddles of Revelation. In the analysis which will be given in the next chapter, it will be shown that the Apocalypse is a coherent whole, symmetrical, and having every detail fitted into its appropriate page with studied care. In its orderly arrangement and concise statement, the book is a model of precise literate workmanship, but it contains a series of elaborate puzzles, some of which are based upon numerical value of certain Greek words, thereby serving to verify the correct interpretation of the more important symbols, and as the detailed explanation of these in the analysis would interrupt the interpretation of the book as a whole. For the sake of clearness, the solution of these puzzles will here be given in advance. So in the Apocalypse, 4 animal symbols, or we say the beasts, or beast, that is, are conspicuously dramatically persona. 1, a lamb, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, and who is identified as Jesus, Isusos, I should say, who becomes the, quote, the conqueror, end quote. 2. A beast resembling a leopard with a bear's feet and lion's mouth and having 7 heads and 10 horns. 3. A red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and who is, quote, the devil the devil and Satan, end quote. And 4. A beast having 2 horns like a lamb, but speaking like a dragon, and who is called the pseudo-seer or false teacher. So it's pseudo, okay? It's not literal. Of these 4, the leopard is particularly referred to as the, quote, the beast. And concerning him, the Apocalypse says, quote, here is cleverness. Then it has a bracket here, he has here, Sophia. So we know that Sophia represents wisdom, okay? He who has the nous, which is up here with your head, let him count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, end quote. So what is the beast? Well, in the fundamentalists and almost all of the presupposition, not presupposition, but pre-trib and all this kind of stuff where they invent all these doctrines later on, they take this literal. They see a beast, a literal beast. When you begin to break this down, the number 666 is the beast, is to do with your flesh. Okay, it is always wanting its way. It is always wanting to be fed. It is always wanting whatever to suit its not needs, partially needs, but also what it wants from others. So this would be also your sexual appetites, you see. And so this is something that people don't understand. Most people today express themselves clearly in our society in many ways. And what I mean by that is that they're completely become so wild in actually revealing what they want. They're just out there and expressing themselves, such and such. That didn't take place 60 years ago or 50 years ago. It's all changed dramatically in the Western civilization, which is also the collapse of the Western civilization in a lot of ways too. So the cleverness of this puzzle lies in its very simplicity. For the words the nous, the familiar term in Greek philosophy for the higher mind or man, naturally suggests the correct answer. The threm, the cognitive term for the lower mind or man. As numbers are expressed in Greek by the letters of the alphabet and not by arithmetic figures, the number of the name is simply the sum of the numerical values of the letters composing it. Thus, the numerical value of therm is 666. If this were the whole of the puzzle, it would be almost puerile, but it is. In fact, only a part of it, and the clue to is elaborate puzzle, which is in the entirely is remarkable, ingenious. It will be noticed that the, and we have this here, I'll show this also, reveal this later. But right now I'm not going to do this. There's a couple things, slides that have to be put up when I do this. The beast, the ferine mind is the faculty ruling over one of the 4 somatic divisions from which the natural inference is drawn that the 3 other beasts likewise are the regions of the 3 other somatic, or somatic, I should say, divisions. Sorry, it should be somatic, not somatic. You can pronounce it either way. Anyway, just say somatic. The lamb, Isusus, would therefore stand for the highest of these, the nous, which is again, the nous is referring that. Now, the word Isusus gives the sum of 888. The red dragon, that is, quote, the archaic serpent, who is the devil and Satan, end quote, fits neatly into place as the ruler of the 3rd somatic division, which word yields the number 555, and it's called Ephen-Humanit. The 4th beast, the fourth beast, the false prophet, takes his place in the 4th division as the generate principle, that is sensuality. The number of his name being 333. Plato applies to this principle the word allolesis, which has the same meaning and the same numerical value. Placing these four names with their numbers in the form of a diagram of the four somatic divisions, it becomes apparent that the puzzle is still only partially solved. Evidently, a complete series of numbers is intended. A space is left where the diagram. To fill out the meaning requires the cross, and another space for the good serpent, end quote. The regenerative force, the, quote, bad serpent, end quote, the devil, the lust for life, which leads to generation being already included. The number of the cross, meaning styros, is 777. Of course, the spiraling electric force, that is the coil of the serpent, is the Sephrimon, which word gives the number 444. Now, the action of this force upon the brain, where its triple current forms the cross, gives the noetic perception direct cognition, or highest degree of knowledge, so beautifully defined by Plato. And to express this in the diagram, it becomes necessary to insert the word epistemon, the philosophical and esoteric equivalent for the exoteric word Christos. Its numerical value is 999. Further, he who has attained to the higher knowledge forthwith becomes the conqueror. And as the conqueror, end quote, is the hero, so to say, of the Apocalypse drama. His name must be placed at the head of the list as Hol Nakan, with this number being 1,000. And that's the highest aspect of who you are. The diagram thus makes clear the basic teaching of the Apocalypse, which treats of the Spiramon and is energizing through the vital centers as a conqueror gains mastery over them and builds up for himself out of that primordial substance his immortal vehicle, the monogenetic or solar body. This deathless solar vessel is symbolized as a city which comes down out of the sky. So this is the, I don't know if you've gone to church or not, but this is the whole idea that there's going to be a spiritual Jerusalem for only those who are Christians after all these things have conquered. That's not right. It's completely missed here. You know, this is the whole idea when we hear the certain word as rapture. Well, rapture is simply being caught up. That's what the word means. But the problem is they're looking on the outside. And so they're expecting, that is, those who are saints to rapture up during the certain times of the tribulation. Well, the word tribulation has very little to do with that. The tribulation is simply dealing with life itself and being able to, quote unquote, survive. See, they've concocted this whole story. So rapture means caught up, but in reality, that is simply asking what happens to you when you have ascension. You actually are caught up. You move upward because your whole spinal cord, all that takes place, and it works with your nerves and eventually gets to your head. And what happens simply is that leads to the idea that your pineal gland suddenly has another event, the more important event, becomes the light within your head. You see? And with that, there's no darkness anymore. When that means darkness, you found truth. You found out who you really are, you see. But I've kind of got off the deal here, so I shouldn't have done it. I'm just kind of explaining to people who are Christians these days. And they're all different views here. We won't go in all that. That's going to make it more confusing. But I just want to explain that there are those who are Christians simply think they're actually right now, most of them are waiting for Jesus to come back. It has nothing to do with that, folks. Nothing. See where I'm at here. I hope I haven't. Let's see, congregation. Okay, this deathless solar vessel is symbolized as a city. Oh yeah, I've done that. All right, and it's portrayed with a poetic imagery of exquisite beauty. Okay, the inscription with its wealth of detail should be enough to show very clearly what the city really is. But as Johannes, I should say, has supplied conclusive proof of the true meaning by inserting it in the description, a puzzle which reads as follows. Here's a quote. The divinity who was talking with me had for a measure a golden reed to measure the city, its gateway, and its wall. The city lies 4 square, and its length is as great as the width. He measured the city with the reed by static, S-T-A-D-I-A, 12,000 in length. Its length would be. Width and height are equal. And he measures its walls 144 cubits, including the measures of a man that is of a divinity. As the expression by TThe, that is, shows that the measurement should not be taken as stadia, it naturally follows that it should be reduced to miles. So therefore, dividing 12,000 by 7.5, the number of stadia to the Jewish mile, the quotum is 1,600, and this is the numerical value of the words of the solar body. The authorized version, the preposition epi or by is not translated, being omitted as redundant, which merely shows the untrustworthiness of an empirical translation. That version also reads, quote, 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of an angel. The inserted words making the passage meaningless. The wall, the solar body, is its aura or radiance. But the letters of that same number to only 143. So you have 144 cubits, and now you're having something here being 143. As a puzzle, that number would be too transparent, nor would it harmonize with the other numbers given in relation to the city, as to 12,000, 12 gateways, 12 foundations, etc., all of which have a real or apparent reference to the zodiac. Therefore, Ioannis increased it to 144, the square of 12, by adding another alpha, which he calls the, quote, the measure of a man, that is, of a divinity, end quote. In the formula, quote, I am the alpha and the omega, the first and the last, end quote. Alpha is the symbol of a divine man or divinity. Did you know that? Before his fall into matter. That means it simply is there was already, I won't go into that. I'm just I'm going to continue reading here because I'll spend a whole hour here. His fall into matter. And omega is the symbol of the perfected man who has passed through the cycle of reincarnation and regained the spiritual consciousness. That's what it's all about. This was what all this is all about, simply seeking your spiritual consciousness. The city is described as having the form of a cube. To solve this element in the puzzle, it is only, and I have a description, I'll show that also, it's called the cubical city unfold. But what it is simply is, and I can't think of who the guy did this, but it's basically a deal with man, as a man holding his arms out, his legs, and his head. I can't remember who's the artist, or not the artist, but whoever made this famous thing in the past. Necessary to unfold the cube, thereby disclosing a cross. So what happens simply when this cube, this whole thing is spread out, it is in a round form that is an oval type of deal, not a complete circle, actually. It's almost like an egg. It's egg-shaped, you see. So the top is rounded, but it comes skewed down to a smaller part as it comes together and becomes one particular thing here, which looks like an egg. And within it is 1, 2, 3, the 6 cubits, so to speak. That is 6 cubes in this. But you have one for the head, you have one for the chest area, you have one for the one right arm, one for the left arm, so there's 4. Then you have one for the upper legs, that is your thighs, and you have the one for the feet. So that adds up to 6. So although Johannes speaks of measuring the, quote, the city, its gateways, and its wall, end quote, he does not give the measure of the gateways for the very obvious reason that it is wholly unnecessary, since the word, quote, gateway, end quote, or as he would say simply, is a pylon or a orifice, sufficiently indicating their nature. They are the 12 orifices of the body. In the Upanishads, the human body is often called poetically the 12-gate city of God's abode. Okay? And that is the end of the chapter here. This is chapter 3. So what it's showing here simply is that what he's trying to explain, I haven't read this particular book. This is a book I need to look into. It's just simply called Upanishads. I'm pronouncing it wrong, folks. Please forgive me. Upanishads. I have not read the book yet. The human body is often called poetically the 12-gate city. So everybody's looking for the 12 gates that actually even, I think it's in Matthew, probably, maybe I should go back to John, that talks about this gate of the city, such and such. Not only here, but it's also pointed, I think, in one of the 4 books by one of the writers, either Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. I don't. But it talks about certain mystical language, so to speak, and it throws people off. I don't want to go any further because simply it's the end of chapter 3. Okay, so this is what's going on. You see, and people get this wrong, totally wrong. And I grew up in this stuff. What we call fundamentals. It's what they call Christian fundamentalism. Okay, and fundamentalism simply is very little. But almost all other particular evangelical Protestant churches have bought into this. The only groups that have not bought into this would be what I would call the Episcopalians. Nationally, the Catholics don't see it this way. I don't know what way they see it. And sometimes I'll go into what I call this whole apparatus of these eschatology, which is the study of the last things or last days. But this is not what I want to focus on. Yes, good to see you, H2O Savior. Thank you for being here. Good evening. But at this point, we're going to end the video because I don't want to go super long with this. I want to get into the next chapter, which would be chapter 4. So at this point, I appreciate each one is here. I will also post this, which will be in my YouTube channel, but also I'll post it on my Facebook, and with my name there being simply Brant, B-R-A-N-T, Hunt, H-U-N-T. And what we'll do I'll post some of those photos I've taken from the particular book so you can see this. Okay? All right. We're going to conclude that. Thank you for being here for chapter 3. Okay? Thank you.